Hello and welcome to Rise of the Mole People. This is Jess, and today I'm talking to Hadder Martinez, who is the author of The Horn of Dawn, The Symphony of the Sephira, Book 1. Welcome to the show, Hadder.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. So I read your book last year, absolutely loved it. I mean, it's a very meaty book. It's got a lot in it. I mean, it's got more than I could cover in my very short review. So I think what we'll do is you can tell us a little bit about yourself, and also the kind of the background of your writing, where the idea came from.
Okay. Well, I've been writing the book since I was around 13 years old. Writing about the world, learning how to do it. And that was around the time when I started actually getting interested in fantasy and horror and sci-fi and all of that. And the world itself just kind of grew over the years. Around the time I was in high school, we started a game of Dungeons and Dragons with a good friend of ours who kind of introduced it to us. And eventually I ended up DMing that campaign and used that time to just expand on places everywhere they visited, everything they did. I took notes, I kept them, and then in my own time, I would just kind of transfer them over. So I had the campaign that I had with them, and then secretly I was pushing all that information into another file and saving it for later. I'm gonna use all of this.
Yeah.
And honestly, the writing has just been with me ever since. I haven't stopped. And I always have, and I'm one of those, I carry like a notebook with me at all times. If an idea strikes me of something, I like to just quickly write it down. And you find inspiration in the weirdest of places. So it's just been a very long process of just adding little things here and there that will eventually grant flavor to the world and to the stories that take place in them.
Yeah. I mean, it shows the books. It's, what is it, 400 and nearly 500 pages long. So it's good. It's brilliant. It's so layered, and it's just chocker with world building and amazing characters, and it's just brilliant. I was like, that's the kind of book that I want to write for my first fantasy book. My first fantasy book is not like that. My second one, I think, is probably more along the lines, but so it's dark fantasy. It's yes. Not for the light-hearted, no. In my opinion, but it's brilliant. So did you ever find that it was difficult to write freely like that? Because I used to find it quite hard with kind of censoring myself, like some things I wasn't sure about writing, but I kind of, in my second book, I kind of let go a little bit more. Did you ever have that, or were you always kind of leaping head first into everything?
No. I mean, I was this book, How It Is Now, is about the 9th iteration of itself. I wrote, deleted, rewrote, edited, deleted, rewrote, and this is the writing process. I've always told people that it was through writing this book that I taught myself to write. You go through, you read, and, oh my God, I want to add that. I want people to read me like that scene that I need to know how to make people see that or be in that moment. And you read it and you go, wow, I got nowhere near that. Let me try that again. And you just keep trying until you can finally read your own thing and go, wow, I did that. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I felt that. That's great.
It feels good. Yeah. So how long did it take you to actually get from kind of, was that from your Dungeons and Dragons days, that story? You said that did those ideas come from then, or were they kind of older ideas and then you kind of made your own up afterwards, or was that all?
It was happening during that time. It was all happening simultaneously, which thankfully, created a good campaign that my players really liked, because I never centered it around them. I would drop them somewhere, and I would spend the whole week before we even touched the game figuring out who was who, what they were doing, who liked who hated who, where they might catch trouble if they stuck their noses in the wrong places. So the game itself felt very organic for them, because I would just, okay, what do you do? And they look at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you do? This is your game. You decide what you're doing. And that is something that I like to kind of try to bring into my writing, where it doesn't seem like, oh, this obviously this is where this line is going. The world is just shifting and people are flowing through the little cracks in between other events that are happening around them. And I guess that's where that kind of, as you mentioned, like that meatiness comes from. It's because there's so many moving parts happening and kind of all churning in the same direction. But it's more that it's trying to not just have a story that is, although trying, of course, to keep it character focused and character centered, but an understanding that this world is moving on its own around the characters.
Yeah, fabulous. And how long did it take to get from your first draft to your final cut?
As long as I can remember.
I feel like that.
This has been forever in the making.
That's so you've been on a lot of journeys. I can absolutely relate to that. So what was it like at the start? What was your first draft like?
Terrible.
Remember? Terrible.
Awful. Brutally, just blatant plagiarisms of different scenes and movies and comic books and
Brilliant.
And just stories that I'd read, and then when I read it, I was like, wow, this is awful. Let's try this again. But I guess it's how I've learned over the years to, okay, now I got all that fun stuff out of the way. Let me sit here and really ask myself, what are these people doing? Why are they doing it? What are they feeling while they're doing it? But it took forever. It took me 20 years to get to a place where I was like, I will allow another person to read this. This is good. It takes a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And how many of the original characters are still in it, if any?
All of them. Well,
mine actually were original. Mine stayed. I kept the characters. I changed the names, but I kept the characters. But yeah.
Strangely enough, the characters have not changed. The characters have always been there. It's just been kind of everything has changed towards like from where they started out in the story to how their personalities actually developed. That changed. They're still there. They just, I guess you could say they matured over time. They were at the beginning, you would read them like, oh, that's okay. They're characters. And then slowly they started gaining a little bit more depth, a little bit more personal space. That like the increasing that kind of feel that they're real and not just, oh well, here we go, follow the story along, which is it was for me. I call it the blind side. You never know what you're doing until you go back and read it.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're trying to carve something out of a piece of rock, and then you take a step back and go, why did I carve that? Let me find another rock.
Just whistle and walk away. Yeah. But I mean, it clearly worked out in the end, didn't it? So I mean, the book itself, like I said, it's a meaty book. And for people who haven't read it, we've got it starts out with Captain Dorav, and again, names. I'm saying these how I'm going to say them. And then Hadder might say them differently. So, we've had this conversation. It's fine. So Captain Dorav on the deck of the Kayak, I think. It might be Kajak. I don't know. Well, how do you say that word? Kajak. I was like, that's Kayak. It's not a Y. On the deck of the Kajak. And he's got a crew of knights. I think he's not the only one, is he? One of the knights, the Ashuri or the Ashuri.
One of two, yeah.
He's one of two. So he's got his crew on the Kajak, and they're heading to a place called Shipbreaker Sharn, which is where the story kind of it starts out. And then they've got these characters called the Blades of Mepsia, which are the Xyle. The kind of the other race creatures. They're kind of human hybrids, I think, aren't they? Yes. Or you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, they're certainly demi-human, yes.
Yeah. And so you've got Cartacus, who is his lieutenant or lieutenant, as we would say in England. His lieutenant, and he hates them. And so there's this kind of immediate conflict going on, which is nice. And I really like Dorav, and I like Cartacus as well, but he's kind of mean to the Xyles, and they're my favourite favourite characters. So, but yeah, so people who haven't read it, I mean, there's a lot going on like immediately, and then we move on to a town called, now I'm gonna that's Kyra. Is that Kyra?
Yeah. Yes, that's Kyra.
Good. Yeah, so it's a town called Kyra, and then we meet the other characters. So we've got a lot of people happening here, and they all kind of, not all of them meet at the end, but they kind of, their journeys kind of end up in kind of the same place. it's such a great story. There's so much going on. It's one of those books you have to read again, which I will at some point when I have 5 minutes to myself to start another book. So how did you go about that kind of complexity? Because I mean, I know how I would, and that would just be not having any plan whatsoever. That's my life. But what about you? How did you? I mean, I know you had your background with all your your bits and pieces in the drawer that you're waiting to bring out. But
Absolutely.
did you sit down and kind of actually make a proper sketch of the story, or did you just kind of start writing? And I know you also had lots of drafts early on, but in terms of when you sat down and looked at it and said, right, I really need to sort this out, how did you do it?
Well, I will say that there has not been an outline that I have written that any of my characters have stayed loyal to. They are just insubordinate. Yeah. So I do not use outlines. I can't. They're a pointless exercise for me, because no matter what I try and do, eventually the characters will just do whatever they want, and I won't try to force the story the way I want it. I will let it happen however it decides it needs to go. So the complexity is something I've always adored in stories that I read. I like stories that take place from one or two or three, solid points of view. It can give you a very grounded experience. But the reason that this book has the moving parts that it does is because it's meant to be a platform for everything that comes after. So there's a kind of style of writing that I very much admire, that you can come back, like something can be in a story that you're reading and there's maybe a little bit of information or a hint of something. They're like, oh, I wonder what that's about. And then maybe forget about it for a while. And then it comes back to haunt you. Like, I cannot believe you did that back there. And now you're bringing that. So that is the kind of like paced storylines. And I call it patient writing. Sometimes you really just want to bring it all out and just dump information and tell everyone, look, it's so exciting. Look at everything but I really admire when a writer can be patient and just basically just trust me, I'm getting there, and when I get there you'll like it. And
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I try to move it along. But I cannot plan these things. I trust on going back, reading again, just making sure that it is structured and that I'm not losing myself, because that could also happen. You get into these branches of stories and they start breaking off. Wait. You got to bring it all back together and keep it on track, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you talk about characters making up their own stories. I think a lot of writers kind of get that. You get to the point where you're not in control anymore. You're just the person who's putting letters into a computer.
You're just watching it happen. Like, wow, you guys.
They're going on their own little trip, and you're not invited. You're just going to write it down. You're just the scribe. Yeah, it's brilliant. All right, have you written anything outside of this? Do you write like other things, like short stories or anything that no one's read yet? Because I have like a back catalogue of stuff. Lots and lots of things. Was fantasy you were into fantasy from the Dungeons and Dragons thing, but was fantasy kind of always the thing, or did you want to try something else, or were you planning to try something else? Or
well, honestly, fantasy has kind of been like the spine of the book with me. So I do focus mostly on it, but those moments where you're writing and you're staring at the page and the page is staring back and neither of you are speaking to each other. I'll move away from that and open another file and write a little short story or a sci-fi piece, or I'll just get into something else. it's a perfectly natural part of writing where you're just like, you want to sit there and you want to develop the scene, but it's not coming. So I don't let it dissuade me. I'll just write about something else and I'll come back and I'll stare at the page some more, and then something will happen. And now we're here. Now we're having a conversation. So I do love sci-fi. I love horror. So I will write little bits on the side. And the thing of this project itself is that it does swallow a lot of my time, because my intent with it is, of course, I'm going to bring out, like, say, this is book 1, and my intention is to bring out book 2, book 3. And in between those stories are other stories in other parts of the same world that will kind of weave in and around. For example, I did just last year during COVID, I did an episodical on my webpage called the Science Curio and Obscuria's Lure.
I've been on your webpage. I think I've seen some of the things. I've not been able to read all of it, but yeah, there's lots of stuff on there. Carry on.
Well, no, the story, I was just breaking one out every week. I'd just write a snippet and just keeping myself creating, just writing, just keep going. And even got some of my friends involved, and we attempted to do it as an audio experience for a while. We got through like 4 episodes where on the first one you'll hear me reading the story, and my friend who's a sound engineer, he added like some sounds and a little bit of music to it in the background, and it got some of my friends like curious about it. So the next 3 episodes afterwards, someone else was doing the narration, because my voice is not really a narrator's voice. His was a lot deeper. It was better for the role, and we just had a really good time with it. But that was like just before COVID got really bad, and then when it hit, we just couldn't continue it. We couldn't find the time. We couldn't reorganize. So I'm hoping to pick the audio part back up, but the full story is there. It's about 30 snippets, and it's a short story. It reads episodically, and I am currently transferring it over to its own book so that you can read it as prose, so that it makes sense linearly, and it winds into this story. So it's just a lot coming from different directions that I'm trying, because it's an ambitious project. I'll admit that, but if it doesn't scare you a little bit, then it's probably not worth it. Yeah, so I like that. I like looking at it and go, well, I can pull this off. I can do this. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I love that kind of thing. Like, being able to approach something with a different medium from a different angle, but it all being kind of tied into the same world. It's I might have to have a read of that when I have my brain back. How is it structured? You've got a lot of things on it. You've got a lot of You've got like that, and are there other stories, or is it there's like a blog and stuff? Because it's quite a complex website as well, which doesn't surprise me.
Well, the first I put the story up there, which is something I actually intend to do from now on, which is if I write these kind of shorts that have to do with the world, that the Darbatora is the name of the world itself. And so any story that has to do with the world, whether or not it has to do with the Symphony of the Sephira, I'll be putting on there just in case people want to come and read and see what I'm up to, what I'm doing. And then eventually I'll be pulling them off and editing them, structuring them correctly, and then putting them up. And the other things that are on there are actually what I would call the exposition of the world, the little things that you wouldn't otherwise know or that currently aren't in the books. So like Collected Travels, what that is a travel journal of this character called Tewi Niwa. She calls herself the Teacup Knight because she loves tea, and everywhere she goes she has to have tea.
She's British, then.
Yeah. And so it's in her voice and through her eyes, and she just travels around different parts of the world and gives you her impressions of them. Like this is just what I've experienced while I was there. And then you have like the Faith and Heresy, which I take through the eyes of this scholar called Mordigan, Noridi Mordigan, and he basically is sitting there telling you, that religion is not how you have been told. I've found the scrolls, I've found the tablets that tell the true story, and if they catch you reading this, it's heresy. So it's a way to introduce all of these other themes and things that are happening in the world without bogging down the stories that I'm writing. That's just how big this thing got over the years.
Yeah.
I had to create categories for it.
It's really nice to have that kind of other stuff to go behind the scenes of, and I think that's what is brilliant about fantasy and science fiction to a degree, I think. But it sounds. I think I looked on your website before I'd read your book, so I probably got a better grounding now to kind of. I don't know actually. Is it? Do you need to read the book before you can kind of get into the other stuff? Or no? Kind of.
Not
okay.
really. No. I mean, it's like I said, the website is about the world itself, and it'll give you. I even mentioned in there, like, the world. That is my website. It's just to express the world and its weirdness and all the strange kind of little pieces that make it up. Because for me, it is probably one of the most important characters in all of my stories is the world itself. That's how I view it. Like, it has its own thing going on, and it's not enslaved to the stories. So it lives on its own, and I like keeping that difference so that I guess certain storylines stay consistent. Mm-hmm. For example, like we were having a little chat about it earlier about you were mentioning the grimdark thing, and how it has become popular. And to be honest, I place those tags on my stories as kind of grimdark, but I don't go all the way to that angle. I like to consider my story somewhere between epic fantasy and grimdark. Like, it's this little in between where, yes, none of the characters are wearing plot armor. They could die very strangely if that's just where the story goes, and I'm not going to protect them from their mistakes. But I'm also not trying to be purposefully just grim and this is all going to be awful and you're going to put the book down and wonder why you picked it up. Although I love those kinds of stories. So for me, it might end up over time leaning in that direction. So it's just kind of like it's that shift between kind of an oscillation between epic fantasy and grimdark fantasy.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where I like dark fantasy. I like it in the kind of in betweeny bit. I still like to feel like I'm in a, I don't like to feel like I'm in the real world, because you can find very grim stories if you just read medieval history. So it's like, there are some pretty horrific things that happen then. So it's nice to have that, other races and others, other things going on, and this, made up words, which you love and I love. And I love
absolutely.
But which you get that kind of freedom with it, don't you? But I mean, I'm not against grimdark. It's not it's not a genre or a subgenre that I dislike. I think it just there's quite a lot of I don't know, maybe pressure on people nowadays because of how popular Game of Thrones was for so long, that now people, I don't know if they expect or they feel like they have to write something that's really, really rough and raw and a bit much sometimes. but I don't know, maybe that's just me. So I'll put a link up for your website so people can go on there and hopefully read the book and read the website as well. But the website's up for free, so if you want to read that stuff first and then go and get the book, you should definitely get the book. So you're working on your second book at the moment, aren't you?
Yes.
If I can tell everyone that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No pressure.
I know.
But
it is a current work in progress, and it's coming along nicely. And I'm a little as it starts progressing, I'm like, either this book is going to be a lot longer than the first, or I'm going to have to break it up, because now they're getting into some really interesting things, and it's everything that happened in the first book is now the consequences of that are starting to show, and I'll carry on, and hopefully sometime soon I'll know exactly how I'm gonna split all of the little writings up and how everything's gonna fit together. And it's been a journey. It has been a journey writing that second one. It's a lot of fun.
Felt amazing though, didn't it? Finishing the first one, and then
Oh,
kind of
absolutely.
your next one is like it's set up so you can, there's no kind of restriction on how much you can tell. You could just write a book that's 1,000 pages long, but there's no you're not restricted by people not knowing what the previous story was because it's there. So then you can just go out there in the world. So I was talking to a previous interviewee regarding kind of writing advice. So I don't know
Okay.
I don't know whether you kind of go on those websites, or where did you do a lot of your kind of development on your own, or did you kind of seek for help elsewhere? Or because I found it, I was, when I was writing my first novel, because I'd never really written prose, so I used to write everything in script format. So I had to learn how to write prose, which was hard. But kind of you find yourself, did you find yourself seeking out that kind of advice to find a way of putting the story together, or did you kind of just develop it, or were you quite good at prose anyway? Because some people are.
Well, I will say that it was a little bit of both. I think obviously it does not need to be said that writing is a solitary endeavor, and that you can sometimes just kind of get swallowed by it, and a lot of writers thrive off of that, like just zoning into that page, and everything around just disappears. But over time, a lot of that will get you into, I don't know if this is good, because I'm the only one interacting with it. So eventually, after my third or fourth iteration of this novel and writing it, I said, let me look at what other people are talking about writing. Let me go on and listen to a couple of podcasts and writing groups and see just what the conversation is. And it is an invaluable tool to just listen to people talk about writing, about storytelling, about their love for the craft, about character development, the do's and don'ts that are always, but if you can get away with it, go ahead. Because that's one beautiful thing about writing. It's like there are cliches and there are tropes, but they're only bad if when you read them, you go, oh, that's so cliche. Because let's say, for example, you mentioned George R. R. Martin too, and it's funny because he is by far my favorite writer of all time. The things that he does, blew me away when I started reading him, because he will take a trope, he will introduce it, he will make you feel like this is what things are going to be about, and then he flips it on its head, throws it, stabs it with a sword, throws it in a pit of fire, makes the horses pee on it, and you're like, wow, you went there. That's amazing what you just did. And that kind of mastery, that kind of that skilled tool set that the man has is mind-boggling to me. But it's something to aim for, in my opinion. So I'm always looking to hear. It's good, even if you're not talking to anyone. It's good to feel a part of a community of people that are passionate about the same things, that are going through the same trials, and just need someone to tell them, don't stop writing, keep going. Sure, have your moment, have your breakdown, throw the manuscript in the air. I hate this. This sucks. I'm no good. Pick it back up, put it back down, keep writing, keep going, because it is worth it in the end. When you can read your own and say, wow, I can't believe I just love that, it makes it all worth it. Makes it all worth it.
Yeah. yes, the throwing the manuscript in the air thing. It's imposter syndrome, isn't it? It's like, I can't be a writer. It's terrible. But I think in a way it's how you did you get a lot of feedback? I think in a way it's that kind of part of the learning curve, is to get brutally honest feedback, and not necessarily brutal, brutally honest feedback from people, to kind of hear what is absolutely terrible about your work, so you can fix it.
I agree with you completely. Actually, it was funny because some of my first drafts, I would hand them over to friends who were avid readers, thankfully, and they would go through it and come back with, wow, I loved it. This was so good. Like, I love this, and I love that, and I love the other thing. And I would look at them and go, yeah, but what didn't you like about it? I need to know what sucked so that I can hone in on it. And they were like, oh no, it's fine. And then I would read it and go, how did you not see that suck? That suck is right there. So I find, like, let's say your review, I loved your review because you go into the positives, you go into the negatives, and it's honest, and it is just what it is. And those kinds of that kind of feedback can be, for me, very motivating. Like, okay, I see where I went right. I see where I have a little bit of a slippery slope. Let me tighten this up. Let me tighten that up, and we'll get better and improve, and as they say, tumble forward. We'll just kind of keep tumbling, falling, getting up, just keep tumbling forward, and it helps you grow as a writer. You need people to look at what you've written and to be able to accept that, as much as you may feel for the story, it's like a child. You eventually have to let it grow up, and you can't be hurt every time it does something wrong. You just have to, okay, we're going to correct this behavior, and move forward. And that's all.
Yeah, take it on board. Yeah, that's how we grow. Yeah, no, I mean, my review, I have to, I always look at, both sides of a book. Sometimes I'm just, it's a brilliant book. Don't get me wrong. I do sometimes have to pull out just little bits. No, I think it would have slightly changed my experience of the book, but there's nothing in it that I thought was, I wouldn't say negative. I refuse your use of that word. You shouldn't see it as negative. It really wasn't. It was it's more taste. I think it was more taste for me. I don't think that there was anything particularly wrong with because there were some extra characters that you bring in at the end, which were fine. They were written brilliantly, but it's just I was well into the story, and I think it would just I would have probably not noticed if they weren't there, but it was still brilliantly written. It just for me it was just a taste thing. I think there was nothing that I was reading it through, and it was like there's nothing that I was like, oh, this is.
And to be honest, I had a bit of a chuckle of that because I knew that was coming. There was something that I added to I had a little bit of a debate with some friends about that kind of style, and it's I have a friend who's a musician. We're very much into music. I am not a musician in any scope of the word, but I have a great appreciation for music, and some of the music that I love the most are compilation tracks where you'll hear a song out, and as the song is ending, the beginning of the next song begins to play. The notes, the tone, it seeps into that first song and then opens up into the second. And I just made this decision. I'm going to do that in writing. I'm going to have cameos of these 2-3 different characters, and I'm just going to insert them, and they might seem a little jarringly out of place to someone who is just reading that one structured book. But it is my intention that as the story progresses, suddenly those tones and those sounds begin to get louder and clearer. Oh. And that's why. Yeah. And it's again, it might be, it might come back to bite me a little bit, but I was happy with it because that's the kind of continuity that I'm trying to add into the books, where they just kind of flow into each other, and it's almost like one big long story split into parts, so to speak.
No, I get that. And I actually explaining it like that, I think it's an interesting way to go with it. And I think if it wasn't just a single book, if I'd had that 2 or 3 of them and saw that was the structure, then it'd just be like, oh, okay. But yeah, I think it's just it's a taste thing. I think that was what it doesn't tarnish the book for me in any way. Absolutely not. No. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see where those characters are going, because their snippets were good. So
okay. That was the intention, and hopefully as it progresses on, especially in the second book, they take a very strong role. So hopefully the effect will have cleared. But of course I have to, go ahead and get that second one out.
You have to finish it.
So that
Come on. No rush. Yeah. No, God, no rush. Let's not rush. Perfection. I don't know if anything's ever perfection, but let's not rush it anyway. So do you what do you think is the best or the worst and or both pieces of advice for a new writer? Because you finish your first book, which is excellent. So I mean, you've done something right, in my opinion. So what do you think? Did you get not like get directly from a living person, but I mean, from anywhere? Did you get advice that you just thought, wow, yeah, that's changed the way that I go about something, or bad advice that maybe you tried and then actually it kind of ruined your flow? Because there's a lot of that out there.
Yes. I would say, in my experience, the best advice that I've ever been given is to again, that I can go ahead and use the cliche, is that just don't give up. Don't stop writing. If you have to do it, because it is worth it, and keep going. And regardless of how you may feel any given moment when writing, absolutely just keep doing it. Keep learning. Keep reading, absorb everything that you can. Try to distill it. Even your average day, if you're staring at something, you go, well, let me describe that roof in my mind. Let me describe that tree in my mind, and you try to put words to it. It keeps that muscle active, and you suddenly, when you're sitting down, it flows easier because you've already kind of done the work. So if that's something that I've done in my own life, where everything is a distillation that's going towards the story. I have done a lot of traveling for that purpose. Everywhere I go, I'm looking at it like, can I write this place? Can I write this cafe? Can I write this river? Can I write this park? Can I make someone see this place? And I'll just try to word it out in my mind. And okay, let's find another word for green, because wow, that's a lot of green. And so that to me would be the best advice, is always be writing. Even if you're not writing, even if you're having a conversation with someone, try to figure out this person, like, all right, where are you coming from, and why is that your opinion? And I like that little twitch that you have when you mention something, right? I'm noticing how your hands move. If you're constantly paying attention and you're saying, this is for a purpose, this is for my story, you'll suddenly realize you're always at work, and it doesn't feel like a hassle. You're just doing it. The worst piece of advice I could say is, I would say, don't get too bogged down with having to be this widely popular kind of writer. Don't worry about what the most successful writers, they understand who they're writing for, and they go for that little niche, and they pour their heart into their story, and they know that little group of people is gonna feel it, because you're speaking the same language. And if you spread yourself out too thin, and you start talking about writing about, oh, what's the market, or what's the trend, or what's hot right now, or let's do the short story money grinder, all that stuff, to me, that is terrible. That's just a death to the art itself. And that would be, don't follow that advice. Don't go on those pages that tell you how to be, a super successful writer in 62 days and with this many short stories. That's awful. That is really just shedding a terrible light on what we're all out here trying to do, which is just create an experience for people to live through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I read a writing book that had that kind of advice, like, just churn it out, pick a kind of a theme or something, and just churn them out. And I'm just like, how do you write like that? I can't write like that. I can't write something for a kind of generic market. I can't pick a theme and go, right, I'm going to write a story about that, because I don't feel anything for that theme. And it just astonished me. I mean, the writers were, I think they were fairly successful in what they'd done, but it just to me feels like a kind of empty thing. I don't know. I have to feel something for the world that I'm creating, as you do, which I'm sure I am absolutely sure you do. But it's like it's you have to feel something for what you're writing. You have to feel something for the story, and kind of what you want to say and where you want to go with it, and having that kind of just write all these things out, but have no real emotional connection or development, because like you said, you're writing your story for 20 years, and one of mine, before I finally published it, it was about 15 years that the story had been there in various forms. So it's like,
not to say that there's a lot of writers are going to be able to do it in a lot quicker time than you or I, and then not go through all of that process and maybe have taken the proper classes and then understood the system that leads you to good storytelling long before we did. So kudos to that, and awesome. But if that is also the process, if it's taking a long time, my advice would just don't be disheartened by that. It is what is the saying? Bram Stoker didn't write Dracula till he was 50. It's fine. Just take your time and get it right and feel good about it, and don't worry about just you have to just churn it out. Just write what you feel, what you love. And honestly, if you can push a book or 3 a year, I am super envious. And wow, and my hands up to that. Wow, that's beautiful. I really wish I could.
One every 3 years, I think.
Yeah, that's just not me. It's just not my speed. I can't do it at that pace. But if you can, go for it. Not saying don't, just but whatever it is that people write, it really should come from the heart, from what they really want to express, and to give people an experience that they can cherish, whether it be dark, whether it be a romance, whether it be a fantasy, a sci-fi. If you're writing about it, it's because it's making you feel something. So if you can make someone else feel that thing, that's what writing is to me.
Yeah. Sharing that story, once you've released it to the world. It's very, very nice, hearing third-party opinions of your books that you've never met these people before. That I think is that's the only thing that really matters to me. I think that people react to it somehow.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really nice. Yeah,
but it's out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I apologise to my listeners and to my guest that technical problems ended that interview early. But many thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next time.